Guys, welcome to the J. Scott Outdoors podcast. Today is going to be a great episode with my friend Steve Chappell of ChappellGuideService.com. And Steve is going to bring a great wealth of knowledge to the table in regards to how to apply in Arizona. And we're going to go over the 2017 elk regulations. We're going to go over some units that Steve feels like are on the uptrend. We're going to talk about draw odds. We're going to talk about the moon phases. We're going to talk about some of the season dates and some of the changes, and it's going to be a great episode. I want to thank him for coming on. Guys, I want to thank you for all your support. Please send me your questions, your comments at jscottoutdoors@gmail.com. You can also follow along Dar and I's adventures on Instagram. That's at jscottoutdoors, and Dar Colburn is at Dar Colburn. You can also go to our website for our guiding business, colburn&scottoutfitters.com. You can also link to the podcast, whether on Android or iTunes, off my website, jscottoutdoors.com. Guys, I want to thank the sponsors of my podcast. First and foremost, GoHunt.com Insider has just released their Arizona draw odds. And these are the true draw odds taking into the consideration of the new change with the 5 and the 15% with the non-resident cap. So these are the most accurate draw odds available. And they are live on Go Hunt Insider. To see those and to sign up for a Insider account, go to gohunt.com/insider. Use the JScott promo code. That's all one word, or JScott with a space in it. Either one works. And you will receive a $50 KUIU gift card. And I want to thank Lorenzo and Chris Porter and their group over at gohunt.com for their support of my podcast. I also want to thank phonescope.com. If you use the JScott16 promo code, you can get 10% off on all Phonescope products. Check them out at phonescope.com. Guys, also Real Game Calls, Drew Rouse, and the guys over there in Gypsum, Colorado. They're coming out with a turkey call. They've been testing called the buck reel. You guys have known about the elk reel. You get a 20% discount when you use the JScott promo code. And I also want to thank the Outdoorsmans, the Optics Authority here in Phoenix, Arizona. It's where I get all my optics. I've known the owners over there for over 20 years, and they are the Optics Authority. If you use the JScott promo code, you call them up, you also use it online, you get a 10% discount. So guys, thanks for all your support. I appreciate all the positive comments through my email. And if you haven't, please go on iTunes and give me a positive review. It helps my placement on iTunes. And let's get right to this episode. And don't forget, February 14th is the deadline for Arizona elk and antelope applications. Welcome to the J. Scott Outdoors podcast. Today we've got Steve Chappell of ChappellGuideService.com. Steve's been on the podcast a bunch, and we always get great feedback when Steve comes on. Steve, how you doing?
I'm doing great, Jay. I'm so glad to be with you again today. I think the last time was sometime during the summer, so I've been looking forward to talking with you again.
Yeah, I get such great feedback. We did a several-part series, I want to say a 3 or 4-part series on elk calling, and you went through all the mechanics of mouth calling and the mechanics of using an external reed call. And I don't believe we've spoken since elk season. How did it go for you in 2016, Steve?
It was a good season, Jay. I can't say that it was the most epic, easy season that I've ever been through. I think part of that was because of the earlier archery dates this past year, the 9th through the 22nd of September. And the rut was a little bit later. And we had a lot of storms during those seasons. So, the bugling was pretty spotty. We still managed to succeed and do well. But I'm kind of hoping that 2017 is a little bit easier go of it this year.
Yeah, for sure. I think those dates, and I believe we even talked about it on the prior podcast, that, those dates of the 9th through the 22nd, in my opinion, if you want a good bugling hunt, that's just too early. And not that you can't hear bulls bugling and not that you can't call in bulls, but, year in and year out, usually by about the 15th, 16th of September, you have a lot more consistent bugling. Of course, I believe we had a full moon right there in the middle of it too.
Yes.
Steve, looking at the Arizona applications, today we're going to talk about elk hunting in Arizona and all the different applications and units that people can apply for. I know it's a hot topic right now, but looking ahead, our moon in September is, I believe, on the 20th of September. The dark moon, excuse me. The dark moon is the 20th of September, and the archery seasons, which I know everybody's fired up about, most of them start on September 15th. And so
Right.
that dark moon, tell me in your mind what that means for the archery hunters going into this 2017 Arizona season.
Yeah, Jay, I completely agree with you about when the rut kind of kicks in. And I've always said the 17th or 18th and beyond until early October is when you really want to be hunting. So those dates are perfect and coincide with that great rutting activity. I've kind of noticed that with the moon and elk hunting, the relationship that I've seen is that when you have a full moon, those elk really instinctually take advantage of that nighttime light, and they do a lot of their rutting during the night. And so by the time it becomes, first light in the morning and you're going to be hunting them, they've worn themselves out fighting and bugling and chasing all night, and they're just pretty much ready to go to bed and bed down for the day. And then the same thing kind of happens in the afternoon. They instinctually know that they have that nighttime light again to rut, so they're sluggish to get up and start rutting in the afternoon. And you're lucky if you get on one good bugling bull before dark. Now I have noticed that you can get on some bulls and have some bugling, say in the middle of the day, although that's not 100% reliable. When I have my way, I definitely like to hunt, the dark moon to mid moon than I do the full moon dates. I've just found that consistently it's a lot better. So this year with the dates, it's going to lend itself, in the moon phase, it's going to lend itself to a lot better hunting, in my opinion.
In your opinion, and I agree with you, in your opinion, does the moon, being dark on the 20th, do you fear at all that maybe the elk won't get cranking until the end of September as the moon starts to grow at night? Or do you think by the 20th being a new moon that there's the timing of that within the month, it actually makes for, I mean, the perfect scenario for an archery hunter starting on the 15th?
Yeah, I kind of like to think that it's going to be good, especially like I said, from like the 18th and beyond, despite the fact that it's going to be a dark moon. I have heard it said, and I did talk to a guy who actually owns a private elk ranch up in Oregon when I was up there one time doing a seminar, and just happened to meet him. And I was asking him about elk in the full moon because I knew he would have a lot of valuable information because he's right there with the elk and observes them at all times. And he told me that most of his cows will cycle right within, I think he said 3 or 4 days of a full moon, is what he told me. Of course, that's typically going to, coincide with, right around that third week of September. But he did say that most of those cows will cycle around that full moon. So that's something I guess we'll have to keep in mind.
Yeah, I mean, I guess the converse of that is, I would rather be hunting in a dark moon phase mid-September than hunting, mid-September in a full moon. Even though I think, your potential rutting activity could be chaotic, it's all going to be, not all, but most of it, it's going to be in the dark. So, I mean, I think this year sets up with the dates being the 15th to the 28th, and with the moon being on the 20th, right in the middle of the hunt, in essence. I think it really sets up for a nice upcoming season. Moisture, it's so hard to predict. I believe
Yes,
the applications are due, I believe, February 14th. It's always a Tuesday, I believe, 7
that's right.
7 p.m. Um,
Yes.
y- you know, One thing to mention about that, we had talked a little bit before this podcast, is, there's still people out there doing the paper applications. In your opinion, why would anybody want to do paper applications, in your opinion?
I have no reasons for that, Jay. As a matter of fact, I have a couple of reasons why you would not want to do a paper application. Number one is because when you do it online, you can actually print out what you just did. In other words, the hunts that you applied for, you have a printout that lists the hunt numbers. So if there was ever a question, like for instance, what if Game and Fish were to issue you an archery cow tag for unit one and you applied for the archery bull tag? You would have a record, a documented record of that with that printout. So I like it for that reason. I also like it for the fact that you're not worried about the mail and the potential of sending in, your application on paper and having it lost in the mail. And if you do it certified mail, then basically someone at Game and Fish has to sign for it, and that could get you into a situation where there's not someone readily available to sign, and and if you wait till the last minute, it could just be a nightmare. So I think in all situations, it really makes sense to apply online, and it's a really pretty simple process. The Arizona Game and Fish has done a great job with the system. I think it's very good. The only thing a person wants to avoid is waiting till the last 5 or 10 minutes on the last day, because a lot of times the computer system gets jammed up and guys have trouble getting in there that last few minutes. So as long as a person applies reasonably within a reasonable amount of time, I always say if you get on there, late January to early February, you're totally fine.
Yeah, and it's funny. I just got back from Mexico Coos deer hunting, and man, there's already people sending me emails and all fired up, saying. And then I had some guys say, "I already applied. I'm already in," and I'm thinking, goodness, we're like 40 days away from it even, being a
Yeah.
deadline. But I mean, I guess if you're that busy and you're that fired up, for me, I like kind of waiting to the last minute. A lot of times not to the last day, but I kind of like to wait the last 2 or 3 days.
Yeah.
See if all of a sudden it just turns completely dry between now and then, or if one unit or another just is getting pounded with snow or rain, maybe that's going to influence my decision.
Yes.
This time of year you don't have to worry about fires as much, but you never know. So I mean, I typically wait a little later in the draw period, and then go ahead and make my decision. But that's just me. Steve,
I
how?
do the same.
Yeah, I mean, just kind of wait and see how all the variables play out.
Right.
In your mind, and you field a lot of calls. Well, let's back up. You've been an outfitter in Arizona for a long, long time, and you obviously have the Extreme Bulls DVD series. You have the Arizona Application DVD, which is a very, very comprehensive, do's and don'ts when you're applying. Can you, from an outfitter's perspective and a hunter that, when you draw a tag, you're stoked to draw a tag in Arizona, can you kind of walk the listeners and myself through how the Arizona draw process works? And this application period, we're talking about elk and antelope, but for this discussion, we're just going to talk about elk.
Yes. Okay. Yeah, and the draw does work the same for both. But yeah, I do cover it very comprehensively on that Arizona Application Strategies DVD. So if somebody, would get that DVD, I think they'd have a real deep understanding of the draw and how to read the reports. But to put it in a nutshell, basically the main things that a person needs to understand is that our draw is a three-phase system, but only the first two phases matter for bull elk. And the reason I say that is because all of the bull elk tags are going to be gone by the time they've gone through the bonus point round, which is the first phase of the draw, where they issue the first 20% of the tags to the highest point holders, although it's down to 15% now with the new change in the draw that they put into effect this past year. I'll get to that in a little bit. And then by the time they go through the random phase of the draw, where they're looking at everyone's first and second choices, they have in effect issued all the bull tags. So you need to keep in mind that it all comes down to your first and your second choice on your application. If you keep that in mind and always remember that the computer is going to consider your first choice and then your second choice when it comes to your application in the sequence of the draw. So you can conceivably draw your second choice. As a matter of fact, I've drawn 3 second choice archery elk hunts in the last 15 years in Arizona. So the draw does work exactly how they say it does. Unlike most states where they're going to consider just your first choice and consider everyone else first choices before they look at second choices, our draw is different. So your first 2 choices are very valid and very important. Aside from that, basically, a person needs to think about their expectations and goals on a hunt. Someone who's a strict trophy hunter and just wants to be looking for 350 and better bulls during the rut, they're going to want to apply for 2 real premium type archery or early rifle hunts on their application and go that way. Now, someone who thinks, okay, I'd be happy with a 320 bull or maybe even a little lesser, a good strategy would be to apply for a very good hunt as their first choice. If it was an archery hunt, apply for one of the premier units, and then think about the odds for their second choice. So they would back it up with a middle tier type of unit as their second choice to give themselves probably 3 times the odds that their first choice would give them. To me, those are the 2 best strategies to use when you're applying. Either go for 2 premier units or go for a premier unit and then a mid-tier unit as your second choice.
Now let's talk about that, because I talk to people every single year that don't quite understand. And let's just throw out the number of non-resident 17 bonus points. And they say, I put in for Unit 9 first choice, swinging for the fence, and I put in for Unit 3C as my second choice, but boy, I sure hope I draw 9.
Mistake. That's a bad mistake. I'm glad you asked that question, Jay, because in that instance, your bonus points are going to come into play. And what's going to happen to that person who applies for 9 and 3C with 17 bonus points is that, as I mentioned a minute ago, the bonus point phase of the draw is the first phase. So what's going to happen is when the computer comes to your application with 17 bonus points, it's going to look at Unit 9 to see if it can be filled. If not, it's going to immediately look at 3C to see if 17 bonus points is enough to get you that 3C tag. And this year, I believe it would automatically get you the 3C tag. So in other words, drawing the 3C tag in the bonus point round gives you 0 chance of drawing the 9 tag. So when people build those kind of bonus points and get up there in the level of points, they really have to think and consider what their second choice is going to be, because basically it can completely eliminate their first choice, as you just highlighted there by saying that.
Yeah, and I think people can't get their arms around the fact that, I'm swinging for the fence with the first one, just a swing for the fence, but I probably won't get my second choice. In reality, you actually had a 0% chance to draw Unit 9, and you automatically drew Unit 3C. So,
yes,
Steve, GoHunt.com Insider is a title sponsor of this podcast, and I don't know if you've seen it yet, but they have launched their non-resident draw odds statistics, taking into consideration the 5 and the 15%, that what you were talking about earlier.
Right.
And
yeah.
if I'm looking at this chart, and obviously I'm not going to give all the numbers away because you have to be an insider member to get these numbers, but in this, for instance, it's saying Unit 9 archery with 17 points as a non-resident had a 0.80 chance of drawing as a non-resident last year, but 3C, it was 100% at 18 points. There were no applications at 17. It was 100% at 16 and a 60% at 15 points.
Yes.
So there, I mean, if someone would have applied with the 17, they automatically would have gotten 3C. And if they don't look at these numbers, they don't know what their second choice they could get. So in my mind, you either need to pick like middle tier units as your first and second, or really good units as your first and second, and know that, okay, I'm putting in for 9 and my second choice is 10. Well, 10 typically has lower odds, and you're
Yeah.
probably never even going to have a chance at 9. So maybe you should have put unit 10 as your first choice.
Yeah, it almost gets harder the more bonus points that you build to know what to apply for because, like you say, basically when you build the point total that it takes to draw a particular unit, then in effect you've given yourself no chance to draw that first choice hunt. So, people down in point levels anywhere from 0 to, say, I don't know, maybe 10 or 12 bonus points, you're totally fine, to say apply for 9 and 10 or 9 and 3C or 9 and 1, and you're only going to draw in the random round, so it's not even a consideration about drawing with your bonus points. But yeah, once you get up there and you're pushing that number to draw in the bonus point round, yeah, you better watch what you apply for second choice. It'll get you in trouble.
Yeah, for sure. Uh, and it's just something. If when you really start digging into the numbers, you really have to know what, who's applying for what and what those trends are. And I think that's the value of Go Hunt Insider. Steve,
Right.
I want to go through some of your favorite units that you personally like to guide in, and you have guides in a bunch of these different units, and maybe just kind of do a little bit of a highlight. Well, before we get to that, I want to go back to the old rule of 20% of the tags went to the non-residents or people with the most bonus points,
Yeah,
and
most bonus points.
now they have it where it's a 5 and 15. Can you explain the 5 and 15? And
Correct.
in my mind, people with 0 to 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 points, they now mathematically have a chance to draw say a unit 9 or a unit 10 or a 23 or a 1, where before they had a 0% chance.
That's exactly right. And that's what that change in the draw did for those people. Overall, it was a good thing, I think, when you take into account everyone and everyone's interests. Yeah, so basically, it used to be a 20% bonus point allotment, but we still had that 10% non-resident cap within the draw. So what was happening, all of the non-resident tags were being issued in the bonus point round. In other words, they were capping out that 10%. So when they got to the regular random part of the draw, there were no non-resident tags left. Well, what they saw is that happening. So to adjust that, let's just take a hunt for easy numbers that's got 100 bull tags. So now on this hunt with 100 bull tags, instead of allowing all 10 of those potential non-resident tags to be issued in that 20% bonus point round, they're now only allowing 5 of those tags to be issued. And then the other 5 are moved into the random draw where a non-resident can potentially draw in that phase of the draw, although they're not guaranteed to the non-resident. That's something that I should mention. But they do have, like you say, a fighting chance of drawing the tag. So basically, in effect, what that did is it gave the residents basically 15% of the tags in the bonus point round, and the non-residents 5% of the tags in the bonus point round. But it opened up the potential for any non-resident to draw any tag any year in the random part of the draw, which I think is a good thing. And I heard, Jay, from a pretty reliable source that through all the hunts, all considered, the non-residents only came short of drawing that 5% in the bonus point round by a total of 6 tags total.
So it really, after it all said and done, it really didn't affect it that much. Is that what you're saying?
Right, right. I think a lot of non-residents who were carrying high point totals and about to draw their hunt, it aggravated them, which I can totally agree and understand with. But the draw still worked very well, and it appeared like the non-residents still took their lion's share of the tags, and basically got. I won't say it's called a quota because it's not. They're not guaranteed, but they did get right up to the percentage in the draw.
Yeah, for sure. Steve, what do you tell people that are applying with someone else, and they're like, hey, Steve, I want to get this tag, and I'm putting in with someone else. What are the pros and cons of applying with someone else?
I tell them, in my opinion, the only way that makes sense is if it's a late rifle hunt where you've got a lot of tags. Because, let's take a late rifle hunt that's got roughly 500 tags. In that scenario, there's going to be 50 available non-resident tags. So chances are, with two people on the application, the draw would have to get down to issuing that 50th tag basically and have two people on the application, which would exceed the non-resident cap. In other words, if they issued those two tags, it would make 51 non-resident tags, and the computer won't do that. So that application would be bypassed. Where that really comes into play is on an archery or early rifle hunt where you've got much fewer tags. Again, if we took that hunt with 100 tags into consideration and there's only 10 non-resident tags available, let's say you're not someone with a bunch of points, and in the random draw, miraculously, the computer comes to your application, it's about ready to issue you that 10th non-resident tag, and you have your buddy on there with you. In that situation, unfortunately, it's going to exceed the non-resident cap. It's going to bypass your application. So I tell guys, late rifle hunts only are the ones that would make sense to apply with a friend. Otherwise, what I advise them to do is apply separately, and then if one of them draws the tag, the other guy can, come along and accompany him on the hunt and have a great time.
Yeah, and I would say the only other reason would be if you had someone that said, I've got 20 points for elk, and I really don't care, and you're sitting there on, 4 points, and, your buddy's like got 20, and he says you can put in with me. Tell me what that does with the way Arizona rounds up and averages their bonus points.
Yeah, it basically would really reward the guy on the low end of the points and really penalize the guy on the high end, but if he doesn't care. So what they would do, in effect, a guy with 20 points and a guy with 4 points, is they add their points together and divide by 2. So that would give them an average of 12 points. So they would go into the draw with 12 bonus points. If the number comes out to 0.5, like for whatever reason, if it was came out to 12.5, they would round it up, and you would be treated as if you had 13 bonus points in that scenario.
Okay, so they always round up in that situation?
Yes, if it's 0.5, yes.
Okay. Trying to think what other questions, little tricks of the application there. Well, let's take a quick break here, and then I want to actually go into units that you like and kind of give a rundown on those.
Absolutely, Jay. Sounds great.
Okay, Steve, you brought up a good point that you wanted to tell the listeners. What is that?
I wanted to talk, Jay, about how the computer treats your application based on how many bonus points you have. I think it's a very important aspect of the draw. So basically, I'll cover that by saying the computer is going to issue you random numbers based on how many points you have, and then it's going to select the lowest one and assign that to your application. So let's say you've got 5 bonus points and you're going to apply this year for 2017. The computer is going to issue you, it's got a random number generating program on it. So what it's going to do is issue you 5 random numbers for your bonus points and then 1 more for your application. And the reason it issues you that extra random number, a lot of people mistakenly think that they have 6 bonus points going into the draw. They don't. They have 5. But the reason that it issues you that extra random number is because a person with 0 bonus points gets a random number issued for their application. So to be fair to all applicants, it's going to issue you that 1 extra random number for your application. So back to the guy with 5 bonus points, the computer's going to issue him those 6 random numbers. It's going to select the lowest one of the 6 and discard the other 5, and it's going to assign that 1 random number to his application. And then in the draw, what the computer does is it starts with the very lowest random number that it generated, looks at that application and consider that applicant's first and second choices before it moves on to the next highest random number that it issued. And then it, obviously considers that person's first and second choices and so on until all the tags are issued. Now, where random numbers come into play in the bonus point round, a lot of people don't understand this. But a lot of times what happens in the bonus point round, that first phase of the draw, is you can have several people with the same amount of bonus points. Like let's say there's 10 people with 18 bonus points who are applying for the same hunt. Well, how does the computer differentiate those guys? What it does is it issues random numbers to all of those applicants, actually all applicants, but then when it's comparing those people who have the same amount of bonus points, it does so and differentiates based on the lowest random number that it generated for each applicant, if that makes sense.
So in other words, if there's 10 people that have 18 points, they all have random numbers, then it looks at, okay, how many of those random numbers have 18 points and which one has the lowest random number?
Correct. Exactly. So in the bonus point round, it bases issuing tags first off on how many points you have. So in other words, somebody with lower points than you won't draw ahead of you unless that non-resident cap has been met. I should mention that. If the non-resident cap has been met, non-residents are cut off right there. But aside from that, let's say that there's 2 non-residents with 18 bonus points or 10 non-residents with 18 bonus points. Basically, the computer differentiates those 10 people based on the lowest random number that it generated for them. So there's times when, let's say there's only a couple of non-resident tags available. Well, only 2 of those guys with 18 points will get the tag because of those random numbers.
Gotcha.
But then I should say in the random part of the draw, after the bonus point round, when we move into the next phase of the draw, when it's considering your first and second choices in the random draw, then it's totally about that lowest random number that it generated for you. And I have friends and people all the time who get aggravated because they say, I put in for the same hunts that this guy put in for, and I had 10 bonus points and he had 3 and he drew the hunt. How is that possible? The draw doesn't work right, or it's rigged, or, he knows somebody in Game and Fish. But the key to understanding that is you have to realize that in that random part of the draw, it's all about what was the lowest random number that computer issued you for your application. So it's very conceivable for someone to draw, right out of the gate or with fewer bonus points than someone else in that random phase of the draw, because it truly is random.
Yeah, I mean, I could see how someone could say it's rigged.
And it's not totally, when they don't understand it. But to me, our draw is perfect because it has an element of fairness, with the bonus point round being first, and those 20% of the tags being issued, like we talked about, 15 and 5 for residents and non-residents. And then we've got that random part of the draw where the remaining 80% of the tags are issued. So, we've got that element of fairness, and then in that element of excitement or randomness. And I just think it's a hybrid draw, and it makes perfect sense, and it's just got the perfect combination of fairness and excitement.
Yeah, for sure. Absolutely. Steve, let's go into the units that you like to guide in. Talk about, maybe we'll just start with the archery elk hunts. We're talking in this case bull elk hunts. Maybe tell me your top 4 or 5 units, and then maybe some mid-tier units.
You bet, Jay. I feel like for the most part, nothing's really changed in my mind with what I consider to be the premier units. And I don't think there's a lot of secret out there, so I don't think I'm really letting anything out of the bag by saying, 9, 10, 1, 23, 3C are typically, what I consider to be the top 5. And I think most guides who are out there a lot and experience these hunts and these units would agree with me on that. Basically all of those units except for 3C, which was removed off the alternative management program several years ago. The other 4 are on the alternative management program, where they, issue tags and manage the herd for a higher bull to cow ratio and a higher, hunt experience quality. Basically that comes down to having a high bull to cow ratio. You're going to have better bugling because there's more competition for those cows. You're going to have more, 340 and 350 type bulls, although there's not a lot of them out there in those premier units. But that's basically what the alternative management units are known for, and that's what makes the rutting, in my opinion, more consistent in those units. Then when you step down to the next level of units, I'm going to include, units like 8, 7 West, 27 probably would be my 3 that would qualify in that bunch. And then, just what I would consider to be just standard, or I don't know, I hate saying lower tier because, any of these units can be pretty good on a given year. You'd be looking at units like 5B South, 5A, 6B, which I hunted quite a few years ago.
7 East.
7 East, exactly. I always tell people, if you draw a hunt like that in one of those units that I just mentioned, you need to come to the unit with the mentality that you're going to experience very spotty bugling and rutting activity. And I'm talking, you could only have good bugling maybe once every 4 or 5 days. And on an archery hunt to kill bulls, you need them to bugle. So, if you're only having good bugling every 3, 4, 5 days, that only gives you maybe 3 days in the whole hunt to capitalize. So the reason I tell people that is they need to manage their time to where they have that entire hunt at their disposal when they come. Otherwise, if they're on a 7-day hunt, it could get really short in a hurry. And if they only have 1 or 2 good bugling days, it could be real disappointing for them. So, other than the top units having, the better bulls on average, 340 and 350 and better bulls, not to say that you can't find a 350 bull in some of those other units, because you can. They're just not as common. But again, the main thing that I see is that spotty, inconsistent bugling on the hunt, which can make it very tough.
Steve, when you and I were running around together out there in the Elk Woods quite a bit, say 10 years ago, what I would consider, back in the heyday, it seemed like, and I use that term loosely just because,
yeah,
in some animals, we're in the heyday. But I feel like elk, our overall quality has slipped. I believe we've shot too many bulls to maintain that quality that we had. I believe we had drought. We had a bunch of different issues, private property issues, things that have impacted that. But it's not like it was in 05. It's not like it was in 03. We had a drought in 02. Good year in 03. 05 was good. Talk a little bit about and people's expectations. You touched on it, but overall, I think we just kind of have to face that Arizona's quality is not what it was 10 years ago. Much like Utah, is not, it's still good, but it's not what it was. And it's hard for some of us that have seen Arizona elk as good as it could, possibly be. And then anytime you start sliding and going down from that, those of us that have done it for a long, long time, it's a little challenging. Would you agree?
Yeah, unfortunately, I do agree with you 100%, because I remember very distinctly that year that you and your wife, Jean, had the Unit 10 archery tags. I believe it was 2005.
Yep.
I mean, Jay, I showed up in the unit, I think it was day 11, and it was incredible, the bugling. And
I know you were over in 8 going, they're not bugling at all. I'm like, dude, they're blowing our door off our trailer here.
Yeah. So, that goes to show what the difference between a premier unit and a mid-tier unit can be like right there. But then it also goes to show how spoiled we were back then, because, I mean, you're right. They were just absolutely tearing it up every day on that hunt in Unit 10. And back in those times, it was the same way in 9 and 3C and 1. And now, these past few years, I've been in Unit 9 consistently, and I just seem to be disappointed more and more with how, they're not bugling consistently. I don't really know the reason for that. I can say the reason for units like 1, where they, went from 150 tags historically up to 300. That's definitely going to impact the quality of the hunt. You put more pressure out and more people in the woods, and the elk are going to feel that impact, and they're not going to bugle as well. But yeah, you are right. We are definitely on the downhill side of the heyday, so to speak. I hope it comes back, because that's what I live for, is that 3 weeks there in September and early October. And I mean, I like for it to be great, just like you do when we go out there. And when it's not so much, it can be a bit of a downer. Like I said, it's a little bit of a mystery to me what's going on. But I sure hope this year, with the better hunt dates and the good moon phase, and what we've started out with, a good moisture year so far, I hope it will all add up to a great elk year for all of us, who get those archery tags and those early rifle tags.
Yeah, for sure. One unit that kind of is jumping out at me is a unit that I used to spend a lot of time in and really, really liked and have hunted several times and guided in there a bunch. And that's Unit 10.
Yeah.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but I want to say they at one point in time had 150. No, I think they actually had 200
Yes.
bull tags, archery bull tags in there. And now they've bumped it all the way back to 100. It'll be interesting to see. I don't think the quality will be visibly
Yes.
seen for a year or two, but if they
Yes.
would keep it at 100 for a couple years, I think we'd see a return in Unit 10 bouncing back to what it was 10 or 12 years ago. I just feel like with the 500 late tags and the 200 and not to mention I believe they had 100 early
Yes.
rifle tags. Let me look
That's
down and
correct.
see how
You're
many
right,
early
Jay.
rifle. I just think they took too many of the top end bulls. Like now they only have let's see 40 early
That's right.
rifle tags. I can remember when it was only 20.
Yeah.
There was
Yeah.
100 bull tags for archery and 100 bull tags for early rifle, and they jumped it all the way up to 200 and 100 early rifle tags, which an early rifle tag has 80-90% success and more, and
Yeah.
you're whacking the top end bulls right off the top.
Yeah, yeah, you're exactly right. That archery hunt was double what it should have been. I like to think now that they've got it down to 100, if they'll keep it there, like you say, it'll be a little bit of a delayed response. Like I don't think a person could go out there this year if they were to draw the tag and there'd be 350 bulls all over the place because it's going to take a little bit of time to rebuild that trophy quality. And then, yeah, the 100 early rifle tags really impacted the quality in that unit. And another thing to keep in mind is, even if a person shoots a genetically gifted, say 320 or 330 bull that's an up and comer, a lot of bulls like that are killed on the archery and early rifle hunts as well. So when you have double the amount of tags that there really should be, and some of those bulls that are being harvested on the hunt are those gifted genetic bulls, that also hurts your trophy quality too going into the future. So I'm really hoping that they keep the archery hunt down to 100, the early rifle hunt no more than 40 where it's at right now. Because even there, year in and year out, just like in 9, they raised the tags this past year in 2016 from 25 to 35 on the early hunt, whether it's the firearms or the muzzleloader, the rifle or the muzzleloader. And I think putting those extra 10 tags in there will ultimately hurt 9 a little bit. So yeah, I think Unit 10, and I hope that it rebounds because it was a phenomenal unit a decade ago, and I hated seeing it slip. But I think it's bound to make a comeback if they keep managing it like they look like they're going to starting this year.
Yeah, and I'm looking at the Go Hunt Insider early archery. This is the non-resident. You mentioned a unit like 6B, and with 8 points as a non-resident last year, it was 100% draw.
Yeah,
So I mean, and there's units in there like you mentioned 7 East. Well, there's with 9 points last year, that was 100% draw. I mean,
yes,
so another one that jumps out at me is like those 4A. I mean, 4A last year, 100% draw at 10 points. I get a lot of people, I'm sure you do too, that are in that 9, 10, 11 point range as a non-resident, and they're saying, should I go late
yeah.
rifle or should I go mid-tier or even lower tier archery? What would you do? And it's like, well,
Oh,
I have to ask them, well, I mean, how much do you archery hunt? And, some of these
yeah.
units like, uh, like a 4A, there's 225 or there's a bunch of people or, would you rather go on a late hunt when you don't hear any bugling? So I think it's up to what the hunter wants.
Yeah, exactly, Jay. I'll be honest with you. That is the very hardest question that gets posed to me. And guys that are in that middle ground with bonus points, that's the very hardest thing that I have to do when I consult and give them advice. And you're right. I say that ultimately it comes down to, do you want to hunt rutting elk or is that not that important to you? Because if it's not, then you can apply for, what I would consider to be the best two late units in the state, and have a reasonable chance at a 320 plus bull, sometimes maybe 340, 350 if things go well and you're a great shooter and in good condition. But if hunting rutting elk, which for me is what I live for, that's as far as hunting, that's what I'm all about. I would always, in my opinion, I would want to hunt any unit during the archery season than any unit during the late hunt, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, we're both suckers for bugling, and I mean that in a good way. Um, for me, elk hunting is, getting to hear them bugle and all of that is huge. Now, I do have one question for you. I get it sometimes. What about the non-resident out there that says, I just want to go experience Arizona in the rut? I mean,
Right.
it's possible to draw antlerless archery elk tags with very, very few points. And that may be a great solution for someone, that wants to go hear elk bugle and still put meat in the freezer. Thoughts on that?
Yeah, for sure. If a guy's not after the antlers, which, for some people, just getting out there and hunting and, sharing the experience with friends or family, I can totally relate to that. I would have to say that I probably err on the side of being an antler hunter, and if I had to admit, but you're exactly right. I mean, you could draw an antlerless tag on any given year, and in most of these units, you're out there during the same time frame. So you would be basically, you're hunting the bugling bulls because they're bugling because they have cows or they're soliciting for cows, and the cows are going to be around those bugling bulls. So, as long as the guy doesn't mind seeing a big old bull and have to pass that and shoot a cow, those antlerless hunts would be a good option for someone like that. I would always say it probably still makes sense if they're interested in hunting a bull at all to put a bull hunt as their first choice and then that antlerless hunt as a second choice. Although by doing that, again, you're never going to build bonus points by doing that because you're going to draw so frequently with those antlerless hunts, but you're going to get a hunt a lot in a decade.
Yeah, for sure. Steve, let's talk about, we've talked about the archery, we've talked about the dates. I want to hear your early rifle and your muzzleloader. Um, but also, while I ask that, are there any other archery hunts that like jump out at you as sleepers this year, or anything you noticed as far as tags dropping, or ooh, that might be a good one to go for? And if not, move right into your favorites for muzzleloader and early rifle, and maybe why you like those picks.
Yeah, Jay, I usually, as far as sleeper units, I always say they're sleepers because the bulls don't bugle well. But I would say, to me, although it's no secret, Unit 10 looks much better to me with the reduction in the tags. That's going to be a real consideration for me on my application. Um, you know, I still think back to Unit 22, that year that you and I first met, the very first year. And, my dad had the 23 hunt and we got that nice bull. And then we went over to 22 and called, and they were just ripping over there. They have an archery hunt over there. And I believe, Jay, that this year, the archery hunt in 22 is the one with the later dates. And I think it starts the 22nd and runs through October 5th.
Yeah, I've got it
And
right here. It's September 22nd through October 5th. There's
yeah,
40 tags in there. They'll be bugling their guts out.
yeah. Not to say that I'm gonna apply for that, but I think that might be a little bit of a sleeper hunt, so to speak.
Yeah,
Not
for a good
necessarily.
experience, for a good
Yeah,
yeah.
exactly,
I
exactly.
I think you get into those late dates in September and those early dates in October, and you get those bulls that are just, those 5 point bulls that are just sounding like monsters, and they're just,
Yeah, yeah.
and I think 22, I think that hunt would be kind of a bugle fest.
Yes.
And with 40 people, that's manageable. And there's areas that you can get away from some people there if you're willing to work at it. So I mean, from a
Yeah.
from a bugling aspect, I'm glad you point out that hunt. I think you're right. Interesting, just looking at these Go Hunt Insider. Last year, 12 points was 100%. There were no apps at 11%. It was 5.2 at 10 points, 4.8 at 9 points.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'm glad you bring that up. Let's actually take a quick break here, and then I want to
Okay.
bounce into early rifle and muzzleloader.
Sounds great, Jay.
Okay, Steve, let's talk about early rifle and muzzleloader. And the one thing I would say about these hunts, having guided the archery and guided muzzleloader and early rifle hunts, is yes, you get to use a rifle. Um, the drawbacks from what I see is you get to hunt after all the archers have jostled all the elk around. You could deal with broken points. Yes, they are bugling their guts out usually, so from a bugling aspect. But I feel like a lot of people go into these early rifle and these muzzleloader hunts with way high expectations.
Right.
They're in the field during when the archers are there and they're seeing big bulls. By the time their hunt starts, a lot of those bulls are broken, and those bulls are jostled around. They're out of their pattern. I'm
Yeah.
not trying to be a Debbie Downer, but I'm just saying I've seen
It's
it
reality.
over and over and over that expectations are way too high, and people end up setting themselves up for a failure because they've got such high expectations of, a 390 around every bush. Well, yeah, September 13th before, 100 of my friends showed up, yeah, we could go find a big bull, but he's anybody's guess where he's at now, and he might be in a truck on the way back to Ohio.
Yeah, and you don't even know for sure. Exactly.
But with that being said, I mean the phenomenal bugling. What units are you looking at this year for early rifle and muzzleloader?
Yeah, I would say for sure, my top picks for that would be that, the Unit 9 muzzleloader hunt. It rotates between the muzzleloader and rifle every other year. It's on the muzzleloader this year with 35 tags. That's going to be a top pick for sure. I think I say this with a little bit of reservation, but I think the Unit 10 hunt could be very good this year with those dates and with the reduction in tags down to 40 again. I don't think there's going to be a lot of 350 bulls around to be had. So, like you say, you got to manage expectations first off. I think a lot of people don't realize, I would say the bulk of bulls that are killed on these early rifle hunts, Jay, in reality are probably 310 to 330
Yeah,
in
I mean
reality.
that's the truth. I mean,
Yeah.
people can read the magazines and see that two or three or four bulls in the state that go 380 plus, and then maybe a handful all across the units that are 350 to 380, and then
Yes.
all the rest of the bulls that are like 330 and under.
Yeah. And I always, it's, 340 and up is in that, bonus gravy range, so to speak.
And it
That,
used to be, I'd say 5, 6, 7 years ago, it used to be 350 and up. And I
yeah.
noticed you slid that down now to 340. And I can't agree. I couldn't agree more that 350, it used to be anything over 350, you ought to think about shooting. Now it's kind of slipped down. Now, obviously, it's different for each unit, but 340 and better, I mean, you better,
Think
you
long
better
and
be
hard.
looking at, yeah.
Yeah, you better. A couple of other hunts that I'll mention, are the Unit 1. It's 1, 2B, 2C, but we refer to it as Unit 1 because that's where the bulk of the elk are at in the unit. It's always a great bugling unit, great hunt. It had that wall of fire in there, but that's been about 5 years now. It's still putting out some pretty good bulls, although, like you say, overall the quality's slipping a little bit. The 3A and 3C hunt's always a good one. It's got 25 tags. Again, with those dates, September 29th through October 5th, there should be good bugling on that hunt. So I like that one. Always like the 23 North hunt. The drawback with it is it's just got 15 tags. And what a guy has to remember, especially a non-resident, no matter how many points you have as a non-resident, with 15 total tags, there's only one potential non-resident tag, and it's a random tag. And it's not even guaranteed to a non-resident. So that hunt, in my mind, does not make a lot of sense to apply for, although it's
What
phenomenal. But let's say you've got you want to swing for the fence. You could put that in as a wild card and hope that you get that one random tag, and then back it up with a good second choice.
Steve, break that down for just a second because I think a lot of people don't really listen to what you just said.
Okay.
And 23 North and 23 South are two of my favorite units as far as quality experience and quality of bulls. But what you're saying is even if a guy had a 20 points as a non-resident or
Yeah.
22 points,
Yeah.
the one non-resident tag in each of those units is completely random, correct?
Yes.
So
Completely
in other
random
words,
and not
it could go
guaranteed.
to a non-resident with one bonus point.
That's exactly right. So, it's pretty cool for that guy if he happened to draw the tag. But as I was mentioning earlier, when the Game and Fish is considering bonus points and averaging bonus points for two people, where let's say we were talking about a guy with 20 and a guy with 4, and their total is 24, so their average is 12. Well, let's just say it was 20 and 5, and their average was 12 and a half. They would round it up to 13. Well, by contrast, when it comes to tag numbers, they round the 0.5 down, and by that I mean on that 23 North hunt with 15 tags, if you take that times the 10% non-resident cap, you get 1.5. So if you're using that same train of thought, you would think, okay, well, they round that 1.5 up to 2, so there's 2 non-resident tags, which equates to 1 bonus point tag and 1 random tag. But that's not correct. With tags, it rounds down. So when you have 15 tags, it rounds it down to 1 tag. And since there's just 1 tag, it's a random tag. And again, I want to stress that it's not even guaranteed to a non-resident. So all 15 of those tags could be issued to residents only. Same way with the 23 South hunt with 5 tags. There's only 1 potential non-resident tag available if that non-resident's application were to come up in the sequence of the draw. He could draw that tag. But if residents were to have lower random numbers generated, there's a chance that no non-resident would even draw 23 North or 23 South.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Absolutely. That's a great point to mention there. And I think a lot of people get caught up in that. And yeah, 23s, they're great units. But when you only have 15 tags, you could have 0 non-residents on those hunts that year.
Yeah. In my mind, just to put it in a nutshell, those 23 hunts are kind of the residents' Disneyland hunts.
Yeah.
If you're a non-resident, I mean, you might as well put in for the state lottery. You'd probably have a better chance.
Yeah, I hear you. Back to the early rifle and muzzleloader. So you like the 9, the 10, the 1, the 3C. You like those hunts. I've been in Mexico, so I really haven't poured over the regs. I just got back. You remember how the last couple years they've slid an early rifle or a muzzleloader hunt? Like I think it was 27 last year, and the year before that it was Unit 9. Do you recall, is there any early rifle hunts slid in front of the archery hunts this year? Or did they do away with that?
Yeah, the only one I see, Jay, and we were just talking about Unit 22. In Unit 22 North, they have the early rifle hunt with 30 tags prior to the archery hunt. So it would run September 15th through September 21st. 7 days there.
Okay, that could be a pretty good hunt.
It could be, yes, if the bulls are bugling well, which that's a little bit of a up in the air thing with those dates.
Yeah, for sure. Steve, talk to me about late elk units that you and your guides like. What is your priority there as far as units?
Yeah, it really differs between rut hunts and late hunts because you're hunting a completely different animal that time of the year. So when you pick a unit, you have to consider the topography first and pick units where it lends itself to glassing and being able to find these reclusive bulls on the late hunt. So, a unit like 9, which can be a great early hunt, is an extremely tough late hunt, and in my opinion doesn't make, one of the top late hunts for me and my guides. We guide in that unit, but it's a tough hunt. So with that in mind, thinking about the topography and burns and that type of thing, for me, Unit 23 is right there at the top. Unit 27 is right there as well. With that big wall of fire that went through, it opened up a lot of what was just timbered in 27. We had a phenomenal late season in there this year, killed several, real trophy, 320 and better bulls in there. Same way in 23, we had a great hunt in there. But again, it goes back to the fact that those units lend themselves to glassing and getting into those rougher areas and finding those reclusive bulls. We also like Unit 10 just because of the terrain there. You got a lot of those volcanic mountains out there in the unit where you can get up and get elevation and glass. And then also there's just little creases and little pockets in that unit that if you know it well, and I've got some guides that live there locally who know those little pockets and creases and do very well in Unit 10. A couple other units that aren't necessarily my favorites during the rut archery and early rifle hunts, but that I like during the late season, again, because of topography, would be units like 7 West, 8, 6A, parts of Unit 1, and then even 22. But if a guy draws 22, he he better be ready for some serious, cliffs and rough country and not a lot of big bulls. But
Yeah,
yeah,
I'm looking at these draws here on Go Hunt Insider, and like just pick a unit like the late hunt in 7 West. Last year with 7 points, it was 100% draw. It was 79% with 6 points.
yep,
Or you take even Unit 9 with 7 points last year, it was 59%. There were no apps with 9, no apps, no apps with 8, no apps with 9. It was someone put in with 10 points and drew it. The one thing I will point out about these late hunts, the late rifle hunts, this last year in 16, I see that the dates were November 25th through December 1st. I was not on that. Typically, that's Desert Bighorn sheep season coming up on December 1st, so I'm always scouting.
right,
But I did notice this year in 17, they moved that from most of the late hunts are December 1st to December 7th,
yes,
which on the face value of that, from my perspective, looking at that, you're typically going to maybe have a little bit cooler weather, which
yes,
you say, well, what difference could a week make? Well, I'm thinking that December 1st through 7th, on average, is a cooler temperature than November 25th through December
right,
1st, year in and year out. So potentially quality of hunt may be better. And even in some of these units like maybe 1 and 27 and 6A, some of these that have real high, 9,000 feet and higher, 8,000 feet and higher, you could also be dealing with snow and such, which
yes.
could be a big positive because it could push some elk down. And I think as far as late hunt dates, December 1st through the 7th is a much better date for those late elk hunters out
I
there.
agree, Jay, because those bulls, when it's really cold out there, they are trying to really, pack on the reserves again because they've been depleted during the rut, and they are all about feeding. And especially when it gets cold, they will feed much, much more and much more during shooting light when you've got colder temperatures. So it makes your glassing time much more effective when it's cold like that. Yeah, you got to dress for it, you got to be ready for it. But like you highlighted, it makes it much better for hunting conditions because those bulls are going to be up and feeding where you can glass them. And then as a side note, it makes it nice because everybody can have Thanksgiving with their family before they go on their late hunt.
Yeah, the guides don't have to be away from their family on the late
Amen.
hunt. Yeah, for sure. I'm looking at late archery. Now we're bumping into something that was started a few years back, where a bunch of these units, like a Unit 9, November 11th through November 24th, 2016, you can hunt the Premier Unit 9. Of course, you're using a bow. Last year, 68% of the people with 8 points that were non-residents drew that, and 100% with 10 points. Or take a unit like 23. 66% of the people with 4 points drew 23 late,
Yes.
which I'm not going to sit here and tell people that those late archery hunts are any picnic because
No.
they're not. But if you had the ability to really scout and spend a lot of time you're actually going to get first crack at those bulls after the rut. And a lot of times those bulls after the rut pull back into those nasty steep canyons. They don't move a lot. And if you do a ton of scouting or go with outfitters that know where those elk hang, you actually can probably have a pretty good hunt as long as you understand they're not bugling and they're very skittish that time of year. And if your trophy expectation is in check, I think those late archery elk hunts are a sleeper.
Yeah, I would agree with that, Jay, because you're right. Those bulls haven't really been hunted or pressured since the rut, and you're going to get the first crack at them. I feel like no doubt you're going to see elk. You're going to be able to glass up and see elk. Then it's all going to come down to your physical capabilities and how good of a stalker you are, and then ultimately how good of a shooter you are. I know we both have a good friend, Kevin Passmore, and
Yep.
he just slays big bulls on these late archery hunts, and it's because, like you say, number one, he's a super stud as far as physical. Um, there's nothing the guy can't do. He's a great glasser, and he spends his time and does his homework. And if you're that type of person and can get out there and scout and glass, and that's kind of your thing, and you like the challenge of hunting those big reclusive bulls with a bow late, yeah, if there is such a thing as a sleeper hunt, I would agree with you that these late archery hunts would be that.
Yeah, and I think with I'm looking at the um, regs right now, and it looks like most of those late hunts are like November 10th through November 23rd. There's some like November 17th through November 30th.
Yes.
So a bunch of those like Unit 9, 8, 9, 10, those are 22 North, 22 South. Those are starting November 17th and running all the way up until the day right before the early or the late rifle hunt starts. It goes all the way to November 30th.
Yeah.
So then again, I think bumping the rifle hunt back, you're now getting those late archery hunts moved back even further. Could potentially have a little cooler weather. If you get snow and stuff, those bulls are going to be on their feet because they're trying to eat to to they've got to create energy and they've got to get up and
Yes.
feed. Could be a great opportunity. The other thing is potentially if it was a dry spell, some of those units, 7 West, 9, 8, 10, you could potentially sit water
Absolutely.
if it was really dry.
Yeah.
So I mean, I think there's some opportunities there. I think those are for people that have a lot of time. I don't think if you plan on a 5-day hunt, you're not going to do very well. But if you have the whole hunt and you're a great hunter, I'm betting you can probably get it done on a pretty good
Yeah,
bull.
Jay, and that reminds me, I'm glad you bring that up. I would say, without a doubt, and I probably have never told you this, but the biggest bull that I've ever seen in my life on the hoof was on a late archery hunt with a guy. We had him at 50 yards and almost got him killed. This bull was an inline 7x7, Jay, that I kid you not was over 420. He was an absolute giant. Um, you know, all
Well,
said and
I,
done,
I
we
think
didn't
some
get
of
the
the
bull
things that
killed, but we did see him on that late hunt, and we did have him at archery range. And unfortunately, he was facing us, and we had a head-on shot, so we didn't have a shot. But nonetheless, a giant bull. And I'll also highlight the fact, now that we're talking about late rifle and late archery hunts, that I talk to people every year. So I want to mention this, who mistakenly apply for the late archery hunt as opposed to the early archery hunt, or the late rifle hunt as opposed to the early rut hunt. So I want to make certain that people, know this going in when they're going to apply, to be sure that you check when you select a hunt code. The computer is going to give you a pop-up box showing you what you just picked. And you never want to apply when you're in a hurry, because you'll overlook something like that. But you always want to confirm that when you make a selection and it brings that pop-up box, be sure that you read it. Read the dates, read the tag numbers, make sure that it says bull elk if that's what you're applying for. Because I probably talk to 5 or 6 people at a minimum every year who mistakenly draw a tag that they didn't think they applied for.
Yeah, I mean, I won't say his name, but you had a client that hunted elk with you, I believe, in 3C, and he put in for Unit 10 and thought he drew a Unit 10 early archery
Yes,
tag, and he drew, I believe, a late archery tag in 10, and
yes,
had conflicts, and was bummed because I think he ended up having like 10 or 12 points or something that he ended up wasting on a late hunt.
Yeah.
Um,
I remember being
so
on
I
the
mean,
phone,
it can
Jay. It
happen.
was kind of funny because I was on the phone with him, and for some reason, I asked him, I think I asked him what his tag number was or something to that effect. And when he told me the tag number and it was like number
You said
one,
no
I was
way.
like, oh no, there's something wrong here with the amount of bonus
Yeah,
points you have to have drawn the early archery hunt in Unit 10 with his total of bonus points. I knew something was wrong, and sure enough, it ended up being the late archery hunt.
yeah, for sure. That's a tough one for someone that's jumping around thinking they're going to get to hear him
Yeah.
bugling. Steve, we've covered a lot of ground. Um, I want to give you a chance if you have anything else you want to point out there. And then I want to talk to you just real briefly about your elk calls, what you're working on. Have you got anything up your sleeve, or are you going to leave us in suspense? How have the sales been going? I know Chris Rowe and myself and Craig Steele, we used that trophy wife and the matriarch. We really like those external read calls. I know you have some great success with your diaphragms and all your calls. Before we get into that, though, do you have anything else you want to add on applying for Arizona Elk 2017?
Yeah, I would just say going back to what we've covered is, to put it in a nutshell, remember it all comes down to your first two choices. And if you're one of those guys that has high point totals, you really need to look and study the statistics, like Jay's talking about at Go Hunt Insider, and know where you're sitting so you don't draw your second choice if that's not really a hunt that you want to get. So really think about that with your bonus points, and remember it all comes down to your first two choices. Aside from that, I would encourage people to take a look at my DVD. It's on my website. You can order it off my website, free shipping. It's really going to highlight how you can learn to read those bonus point reports, and you can go through and I cover archery, early rifle, late rifle, and I take an example out of each one, and I walk through those reports and explain how you can read those reports, understand how many bonus points it's going to take you to guarantee you the tags, and then I also explain the random phase of the draw and how someone would draw, in that part of the draw with some more detail than I talked about today. So I think especially if somebody watches that DVD a couple of times, because the first time, I can imagine, sometimes your eyes are going to gloss over watching, an hour and 15 minutes of
It's like geometry
exactly,
class in ninth grade.
exactly with the guy up there teaching geometry or calculus. But if you'll watch it a couple of times, I think it'll really sink in, and you'll soak into you, and you'll get a real good grasp for how the draw works. I think that's like the best $20 a person could spend to really understand the draw. So that'd be my advice right there.
I agree. I've got the DVD, and it's a great resource. And you did a phenomenal, so in depth and thorough on it. You did a great job. Um, Elk calls, got great elk calls. Obviously, Extreme Bulls DVDs. Those have been classics. I mean, anybody that's hunted elk in the last 15 years knows the Extreme Bulls series and knows the name Steve Chappell. Um, I'm gonna put you on the spot. You got any? I know you're always tinkering with something. You tinkering?
With elk calls, I do have something up my sleeve, and I have a prototype. I just don't know, Jay, whether we're going to be able to, get it built and released. What probably a lot of people don't know, and I've just had to come to realize this as well, is that to build a new elk call, it requires a separate mold, and that's expensive. And so,
Yep.
I'm working with Rocky Mountain Hunting Calls. I've had a great relationship with them since 2010, I think is when I started. Love what they do building my calls. I'm hopeful that we can get this, prototype out. It is an external reeded call. But even if that were to not happen, I really feel like, you and I talked about it a lot on the podcast earlier this year. It doesn't really necessarily matter how old a call is or what the name of it is or the
No.
marketing or flashy packaging. If it sounds elky and it has that nasal three-dimensional tonal quality, like I think you would agree, like my matriarch and my trophy wife cow calls do, that call's going to work this year, and it's going to work 20 years from now. So, I would just urge people to keep that in mind, and not fall for the flashy marketing campaigns. That all of us are taking in.
Oh yeah.
Because let's face it, it is important. Marketing is important, but at the end of the day, it's all about what a call sounds like when you blow it. So, yeah, again, those calls, the matriarch, the trophy wife, and my mouth diaphragms, I think are going to work this year for a guy, just like they did 5 years ago, and just like they will 20 years from now.
Yeah, they're for sure. They're classics that I can pick up a call, a matriarch that I've had for 6, 7 years and blow it, and it's just sounds great. So I did want to ask you, Real Game Calls, Drew Rouse there in Gypsum, Colorado. Have you heard my commercial on Real Game Calls and that real nasally, real caffy sound that little box call makes? It's just like a little wooden call.
Jay, I did. It's been a long time. It's been since summertime when you and I did the podcast, and I think theirs was right around that same time. But yeah, that definitely did perk my ears up. I would agree with you. That has a very distinct, very elky sound that you just don't get out of most calls.
Yeah, I think, and as having an arsenal where you've got a bunch of different sounds, just makes you a better hunter. Although I could throw you out there with one call and you're gonna tear them up. So
maybe.
It's been great having you on as always. Congrats on your great season last year, you and your guides at Chappell Guide Service, and you guys do a phenomenal job. And I just really appreciate your friendship, appreciate you being on here and sharing your expertise and your knowledge, and want to give you a chance to let people know how they can get a hold of you, and if they want to follow up and talk to you more about this coming elk season 2017 application.
You bet, Jay. I appreciate being on, and I want to extend a special thanks to my guides. I've got some really great ones, and who are real committed to me, and I really appreciate them. Also want to say thanks to Rocky Mountain Hunting Calls, who I said I've worked with since 2010. They've just done some great things with me call-wise, so I'd be remiss if I didn't, mention them and appreciate them. And then, also you, Jay, and your friendship since 1995. You and I really grew up in elk hunting together. I consider you a great friend. I always appreciate being on the podcast because I know you have some great guests, and I don't take being on here lightly. So I really appreciate that. And of course, I'd be remiss if I didn't thank God for all the blessings He's given me in my life, and just being able to do what I love. And know that I have salvation and a home in heaven because of what Jesus did for me. So I'm so grateful for that, and I want everyone to know that. But so aside from that, getting back to what you asked me, if someone wants to get a hold of me, my website is chappellguideservice.com, and that's Chappell with 2 P's and 2 L's. And then we also have a Facebook page, which is Chappell Guide Service. And my email is on my website, and my 1-800 number is also listed on my website, so you can get to me straight off my website and get a hold of me. I like to say that I get back with people within a day. This time of year is pretty busy for me with phone calls, but I really try to be a good businessman and get back with people in a timely manner. So if you give me a call and leave me your phone number, I will get back to you and talk to you about your elk application. So, Jay, thanks again so much for having me on today. It's been a lot of fun as always.
Yeah, for sure. It just dawned on me. 1995. If my math's correct, that's 22 years, big boy.
It is, man.
How old are we getting? Good
yeah,
night.
You and I, we're not walking with canes yet, or we don't have LARP, but give us another 22 years and we might be there, right?
We'll be racing wheelchairs down at the nursing home. Good night, buddy. That's awesome. 22 years. Well, it's been a great 22 years, and it's been great knowing you.
Yeah,
and,
same here.
Tell Barb and the girls hello for me, and we'll be chatting at you down the road.
Will do, Jay. Thank you, and tell your wife Jean hello for me. Thank you so much.
All right, buddy. Take care.
Bye.